obviously I know COVID affected a lot of people's lives in a lot of different ways, but for me it was really a time of grounding and of deep connection to the earth. So I earned my bachelor's degree there and then went on to do my master's degree after that in regenerative organic agriculture. And during that time, I spent 2 years at Seed Savers Exchange, which is up in Decorah, Iowa. I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with Seed Savers Exchange. I always tell people if they don't know about Seed Savers, if they've ever heard of an organic tomato or an heirloom tomato, Seed Savers is the reason why. They house the largest seed bank of heirloom crops in the United States and is the only organization that has made a deposit into Svalbard, the global seed bank, every year since its inception. So I was the field manager there, growing out over 800 varieties of things all over their property for a couple of seasons. Doing that seed work really led me to a lot of questions about access, rematriation, and ethnobotany. So some of these terms may be a little unfamiliar to you. We have talked a lot about repatriation, I think, in this country a good bit. But rematriation is really what the Native American people are talking about when they're talking about taking back seeds and other things that were stolen from them during kind of colonization. And then ethnobotany is really interesting, and we'll get to that in a minute. And it really also led me to kind of pull back that curtain of the commercial seed industry and ask these questions. Where is seed growing? What practices and standards exist? Who owns seed? And why? Why do they own it? How'd they get it? Have you considered where your seed comes from? Is it something you think about? Who produces it? How is it being produced? Even those companies that we really want to love that offer organic and heirloom seed are still working with varieties that have been grown out under large-scale chemical-based agriculture systems. This is not something that I knew before I went to work at Seed Savers. A lot of people think, customers, and we're not pointing fingers here at Seed Savers, everyone's doing the similar thing. We may take things out of the collection or out of the vault and grow them out in small amounts there at the farm in Decorah, but ultimately after that, they're going to larger corporations that are growing them out globally all over the world. And seed transparency, tracing that seed back to its source, is not something that they're interested in investigating at this time. So customers often think that they're getting a unique product, but situations like Peppergate, anybody remember Peppergate? So in 2023, every online seed grower community that I'm a part of kind of exploded because people were buying peppers from Burpee's, peppers from Johnny's, peppers from Baker Creek, and instead of getting the varieties, they were all getting jalapenos, basically. Every packet of every different kind of pepper was a jalapeno. And it really kind of blew up at that point. People started asking these questions. And then last year at Baker Creek, they discovered GMO purple hyacinth genes in what's supposed to be an heirloom organic tomato. And Baker Creek really had to walk that one back really hard. In these situations where we're selling organic heirloom seed, we should not be finding any genetically modified materials. And you, every one of you, does not need specialized training to develop new and improved vegetables adapted to your own growing conditions. So we're going to start out with some basic truths. Seeds are alive. It can be a really strange thing to wrap your head around. Maybe you've had a seed in your pantry or your closet or your basement or your freezer for years at a time, and you're not thinking about that as being living tissue. But seed is just like an egg of a plant, and it's containing all of the information that it needs to grow a new plant and a new life. So seeds are alive. Seeds need to be primed to make connections in the soil. So it's really preferable if it's inheriting its microbiome from its parent plant. There's been some really compelling research. John Kemp from Advancing Eco-Agriculture, I saw him in a really inspiring talk this spring, and he's saying that doing the DNA analysis that they're doing now, they're finding thousands of strains of DNA inside of even the smallest seeds. And what we know and now understand is that those are those connections that the parent plant made during its life cycle with the microbiome of the soil, and that is, a form of epigenetics, basically. All of those relationships are formed once that seed sprouts in the soil. So seeds need to be primed to make those connections. And so if you don't have seed from a plant that you know, a healthy parent plant that was grown in living, vital soil with great conditions that are also similar to your conditions in your garden, that seed might not work well for you, and it might produce sickly, sad plants that are being attacked by diseases and fungal problems and all kinds of issues. And the reason why is because its biome, just like our gut biome, has been damaged or was not inherited in the first place from the parent plant. Plants are doing a lot more than you might know. So in 2019, there was kind of this really seminal research paper written by Dr. James F. White. And what that paper put out, all his decades of research, and there's some really fascinating conversations with him online that you can find, is that plants are not just consuming, not just pumping sugars out into the soil and then uptaking minerals from the soil microbiology. They're actually engaged in rhizophagy. So they're uptaking those microbes and fungi that are in the soil and eating them. And that really kind of flies in the face of what we were taught in kindergarten, that plants are just eating sunlight and making sugar. They're actually eating the soil biome. So if that is not alive and present in your soil, we need to address that in order to get healthy plants. There's also a lot of really fascinating work on redox reactions. Basically, those are all of the energy exchange that's happening that powers our entire ecosystem is happening in the soil, at that soil level. And there is a really strong connection between what we're understanding now about our gut biome and our gut flora and the microbiology of the soil. And there's been a ton of research around people who have contact with soil, with intact ecosystems and healthy soil, are much healthier, much more resistant to disease, and over their lifetimes have much less incidence of cancer, heart disease, all types of things like that. So that connection is really, really important. I did also list here, there are things you can do to inoculate your seed. So if you don't know where your seed's coming from, or you get seed from someone new, I just always encourage everyone to just get some microbial inoculants. There's a lot of different kinds. There's microbial ones and also mycorrhizal ones. So those are speaking to the fungi in the soil or the different microbes in the soil. And you can buy enough inoculant to treat enough seed for 5 acres for like $5. It's very inexpensive, and I can give you some sources if we need to afterwards. So all those microbes in the soil, basically, once that thing is supercharged, they are feeding minerals to the plant roots. And stressed plants don't make good seeds. And then I just always pop in regenerative agriculture principle number 1, keep your soil covered all the time and hydrated, or the microbes will die. So if you see bare soil anywhere, that's your first place to start. Go ahead and get some leaves on there, get some compost on there, get some old straw on there, and keep that soil covered up and moist, or your microbes are going to die. Here's a mycorrhizal mix. I did give some of this away today out on the seed table. This is from a really amazing organization called Green Cover, and it's a really super diverse seed mix. I kind of joked about it when I opened the bag. It smells like the most delicious breakfast cereal. I just wanted to eat it or climb inside the bag. But you can buy a lot of seed mixes like this that have already been treated with these mycorrhizal inoculants. And this is a great one to start with, and you may have picked them up out at the seed table a little while ago. So why does seed saving matter when we can just come to an event like this and get a bunch of free packets of seeds? Why would we bother? It's a lot of work. I like to think about seed stewardship as kind of our birthright as human beings, and it's been a fundamental part of our experience as humans since time immemorial, right? If it weren't for 1,000 generations of ancestors doing this work, we would not have access to all these amazing varieties of seed we have today. So seed stewardship is really a way to connect to those generations of ancestors, to this living work, and more deeply to the natural world. When you're growing plants for seeds, you really have to pay attention to them. You really have to engage with them in a different way. And I also like to think, I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with Robin Wall-Kimmerer and her work, and other really inspiring folks who are encouraging us to see seeds and plants as our living relatives. They are alive. They've been here with us on this planet for a really long time. and they desire to be nurtured, to be grown out. There's some really inspiring work by Rowan White from Sierra Seeds, who sat on the board for a long time at Seed Savers Exchange, where she talks about her grief for these seeds that are being kept in these cold storage environments for 100 years without being grown out. Those seeds want to be grown. They want to live. And also importantly, there are multinational conglomerates that are patenting and commodifying seed rights. And small farmers around the world, in Africa and India, have been fined and put in jail for saving their traditional regionally adapted seed. So seed stewardship is also an act of resistance and solidarity with those people around the world. All right, ethnobotany. What is that? I thought this was really interesting. I signed up for this class when I was in school, and I thought I understood what it was. As a chef, I had a really intimate relationship already with plants and with foods, and I thought I understood ethnobotany. But basically, it's the idea that humans have always migrated, have traveled around the world, and have taken their important food plants with them. They've taken their significant seeds with them. And some things I like to encourage people to think about is Italian food without tomatoes? Tomatoes are from Central America. How did they get to Italy? How did they become the staple food of Italy? Why do we have Italian and Czechoslovakian and Ukrainian varieties of tomatoes out there on our seed tables? They traveled a long way and came back. But those are from Central America and South America, and generations of really smart stewardship has led those from being a really tiny wild plant growing in the Sonoran Desert to what we have today with an infinite variety of tomatoes. How about Irish potatoes? Potatoes are also from the Andes. They're from South America. They traveled around the world and came back. I have a history of getting in arguments with my professors, but I had a professor that just kept saying Irish potatoes, and I went, they're not from there, right? Like, there's no Irish potatoes. And I also like to talk a little bit about Johnny Appleseed. I think that that's a fun story that we've all been told in America, and it's still really cool. You can find on old homestead sites these really old and beautiful varieties of apples. But what was he really doing? And what really is the deal with apples? Because if you plant an apple seed, you're not going to get a tree that bears fruit like the delicious, yummy apple that you tasted. That's because apples are like tetraploids, and every seed inside of them is genetically diverse, and most of them will come as like wild type sour apples. So really what he was doing was creating cider, because at that point it was safer to drink than water in a lot of places. So that's what he was doing. That was what he was up to. And I encourage you to track down old tasty varieties of apples. That's an area where they really need help and saving and work and propagation. There's also some stories that have been shared with me about slaves actually arriving in America with seeds braided into their hair and sewn into the hems of their dresses. I'm going to cry. No, I'm not. I just think that that's really important, right? And it really shows us that we've always been so deeply affiliated with these plants that have fed us and have been part of our lives. So I encourage you to explore this topic further and ask yourself these questions. Who are we without regionally, seasonally, culturally significant foods? I think that there's a lot of us that think about like the melting pot of America, and a lot of our ancestors came here and really lost themselves to the point where, what is American food? And a lot of the things we think up are Italian or German. In this area, a lot of it's German. But who are we without those foods? Who are we without those crops? And how do we kind of get back some of that culture that we've lost? All right, what's sovereignty? This is a tricky word. Sovereignty is defined basically as the ability for a group of people to be self-governing, self-sufficient, to live in harmony with nature's cycles, and to manage their own land, culture, and economy. And in what ways? I mean, obviously, we don't have a lot of these powers right now today within our society or here in our local communities. So in what ways could we bring back some of that resourcefulness to our communities? So I encourage you to ask, if you haven't, where's your food coming from? And can we feed ourselves? The Midwest had, and in some areas still does have, some of the best soils in the world, and abundant waterways, forests, and wildlife. But we currently produce very, very little of our own food here, and we have really high levels of pollution and ecosystem damage. This is reflected back to us in our health and the health of our land and our water. I encourage you guys to get involved in whatever ways you can in doing that work, because it is super duper important. So what can you do? You can start to grow some of your food. Everyone can do this, even if you only have like a small space or a patio. My brother's always grown peppers and tomatoes and things like that in little pots on his patios and apartments. It really connects you to the natural world, and it's really important. So start to grow some of your own food and save seed strategically. So select for things that are desirable to you. So all of our ancestors performed these tasks for thousands of years, and no one taught them how to do it. And that led to these amazingly diverse varieties that we can still find today. So before saving seed, I want you to look for good taste. Please don't save tomatoes that taste bad. It's not worth it. Even if they're really pretty, if it doesn't taste good, don't save it. And save seed from plants that are healthy. And especially this next part is so important. If you have a disease that comes in and wipes out a whole bunch of your plants, but there's a few that survived and are really healthy still, please save seed from those plants, because those plants have resistance, and they can transfer it on to that next generation. And then you can bring your seeds to the seed swap and share them with your community. And after that, I want you to dive in and try a seed contract. I did a couple this year. Even at Merry Lea, I had a couple of organizations I was working with that I was able to grow out seed for and send back to them. It's a fun way to get a little extra money and to learn and build those skills within our community. It's really, really important. And this way we can all get access to locally adapted, strong, healthy seed. Where to start? Start with something simple. Tomatoes, lettuce, peas, and beans are all self-pollinating plants, and they'll give you some practice with both wet and dry seeded processing methods. And I'd encourage you to work with crops that you know and love already. It's easier to develop a relationship with a plant that you think is tasty or beautiful, because you will need to deeply observe its life cycle. In order to know when to harvest seed, in order to have that relationship, you're going to have to be paying attention. Really briefly, what are wet and dry processing? So wet processing, the seed is inside of a wet botanical fruit. So things like tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, those need to be fully mature past the time you would normally eat them. A cucumber with ripe seed inside of it is not desirable in a salad. It is not delicious. The outside gets really tough and hard, the seeds get big, and it's not delicious. But that's the time to scoop out those seeds, and you're gonna need to do a quick ferment or rinse them and then dry them. And then dry processed seed refers to seeds that are inside of a dry pod or a capsule. So beans, peas, flowers. If you've ever opened a bean pod, you've already know how to process these seeds. I didn't realize that I brought that to the table as a chef. I've spent thousands of hours opening little English peas in fancy fine dining restaurants, and I didn't realize I was keeping seed at that time, but that's what I was doing. So those just need to be opened and threshed and then cleaned through screens and winnowed with a fan to kind of get rid of that chaff. Let's do some definitions, you guys. What is open pollinated? Anybody have an idea? Throw your hand up. What's open pollinated? Does anybody know what that means? Yeah.
It's out in nature.
Yeah, absolutely. So that means, and it kind of ties directly in with the next one, with heirlooms. So these are varieties that have been saved by a person over time. For it to be labeled as an heirloom, it has to be for 50 years. We have to show 50 years of stewardship. Hilariously, the seed historian at Seed Savers Exchange explained this to me and then made some reference to like the 1920s or 30s, and I went, that was 1975, right? It's that makes us all feel really old, right? So an heirloom is just an open pollinated plant of a historic variety that's been stewarded by usually one family for 50 years. A lot of the really troubling work that seed historian has to do is we receive a lot of seed donations there. It's just like a packet, or an envelope and maybe a name, and this is my Aunt Sue's whatever. And it's really on them to kind of like figure that out and trace it back, and it takes a lot of work in some cases to get those donations registered and make sure it's not something we already have in the collection. What about hybrids? Anybody want to take a stab at hybrids? What's a hybrid? Yeah, a cross of two strains. That's really good. So if you take a couple of heirloom plants and you force them to cross-pollinate, basically you're doing that yourself by hand, what you'll get, and this is often also happening in a lab, is a packet that says something like F1. So an F1 hybrid is a cross of two strains, two genetically different strains. And what you'll get in that first generation, if you save seeds from a hybrid, is you'll get infinite genetic variation. So you'll get, if we can think back to like Mendelian gene laws, right? You'll get some that resemble both of the parent plants, and then you'll get a lot of other wacky stuff. So that leads to the next part, which is roguing. If you start with hybrid seed, you're going to want to do a lot of roguing in that first year. So that's when we're talking about taking out undesirable off types. So if you have something specific that you want to breed for, like a tall plant or a short plant or a pink pea flower, you're going to want to take away everything that's not that, and that's called roguing. That's what that process is called. And then one that I talk about a lot right now, because I've been pretty involved in this work, is a Grex, or a land race. And I have a picture. So I planted some squash seed that I got from Going to Seed, which is an adaptation gardening organization. They'll send you seed for free. If you go to their website, you just have to pay for shipping and handling. And they also will pay you to grow out these Grexes. So what a Grex is basically all of the genetic variability. So the seeds of all of these weird-looking squashes came from the same place. So I planted one seed lot of this adaptation mix of Cucurbita pepos, and I got all of those weird squash. So I had a whole field full of all these strange shapes and sizes of squash. And their ask is eat them, taste them, store them, scoop out those seeds, dry them, and send them back. So when we get a tasty one, we save those seeds and we send them back to Going to Seed. And I do have some of their flyers up here. They're a really amazing program. They're run by Joseph Lofthouse, who is a super wacky seed breeder. I encourage you guys to follow him. He's really interesting and a hoot. And then on the other side, I have something that's also a landrace or a Grex. This is a Cherokee cornfield bean mix. So it's super, super diverse. Every bean that you pop open to shell out the beans of will have multiple colors and shapes and sizes of beans inside of it. It's super wacky, but it's been grown on this land for thousands of years, I'm sure, by the Native American people, and it's really, really beautiful. I like to tell people that all beans are tasty as dry beans, but not all of them are great at being green beans. So if you want green beans, you want to pick a specific thing. But I also ate a lot of these as green beans all through the summer, then just kind of stopped picking them later as we got into the fall and closer to frost, and let them mature on the plants, and then shucked them all out and got this just absolutely astonishing assortment of beans. Okay, next I'm going to show you tomato that I grew out for Driftless Seed Supply this year. That's a buddy of mine from Seed Savers. He's gone out on his own with a partner and created Driftless Seed. They're just about the only seed catalog that I'll push for because all of their seed is being regionally grown in the Midwest. So all the growers are here in the Midwest. You can get the information about who exactly grew the seed that you're growing out. So this is Tiger Blush tomato that I grew out for him. It's really beautiful, really fun to grow. And this is a bit of what that looks like. So when you process tomatoes or any wet processed seed, you're going to want to squish it, scoop out the guts, and then let those ferment for a bit. What that does is break down the sugars that are on the outside. So if you guys think about tomato seed, right, it's in that sticky, squidgy capsule kind of stuff. And in order to get really good, viable seed that's going to germinate for years to come, you want to make sure you get all that stuff off. So this fermentation process, it depends on temperature, how long it's going to take. If it's the middle of summer and it's really warm, that thing's going to be bubbly and active in less than 24 hours. It's going to look like this. You can see at the bottom of this, it's forming this raft or the skin on top, and it's really bubbly and active underneath. So all I did after that was add water, pour it off, add water, pour it off. The healthy, viable seed sinks to the bottom of your bucket, so you're just pouring off all of that plant material, all of those sugars, and all of the bad seed. Don't be alarmed at throwing away bad seed that's floating at the top. That's not your target. You don't want it. And then after that, I just put these things on coffee filters, kind of on a tray like this in a room with a fan. And it takes about 24 hours for that to then look like beautiful dry seed that you get in a seed packet. So tomatoes are a really easy one for me, and I think that's a good place to start.
Bucket of water, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, you add a little bit of water, and then you just let that fermentation process happen, and then you rinse, 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 and dry, and you're good to go. You may have to do a little breaking apart of this once it's dry. It kind of is like a crumbly guy that you have to pull those seeds back apart. But those seeds will be viable for a long time, and they're really nice. Outcrossing plants. So these are things that are pollinated by insects or the wind. Corn is a really good example of an outcrossing plant that's wind pollinated. If you look up pollination distances, isolation requirements for corn, it's really tricky and it's really easy to think you cannot grow corn, but we'll talk about some strategies for that, especially here in the Midwest where we're all surrounded by the big GMO cornfields. So you're going to need to isolate the crop that you intend to save seed from so that it doesn't cross-pollinate with another variety. So for corn, some of the things that we might do is grow a big block of it, of your variety that you want to save seed from, and then only take seeds from the middle of the block. That wind is much less likely to pollinate those ears that are inside. You can also isolate with time. So if you pay attention to when the farmers around you are planting corn and then just wait a bit, make sure you're dealing with a variety that you'll have enough time still to get it in there. Or try to plant before the farmers around you, either way, if you can work your soil. There's also hand pollination, which is a bit tricky with corn, and I'm sure you guys can find some great videos about how to do that, but basically you just put a bag over the ears that you want to pollinate, then you take the pollen producing part off of the top of it, and you just put that pollen right into those bags and close them back up. That ensures that you don't get any pollen from other varieties that are in your area. People also do this a lot with squash. So if you pinch closed your flowers, so you know that they're not opening up. They're typically pollinated very early in the morning by a little squash beetle, and people were really confused for a long time about how squash were being pollinated because of that. Happens very early in the morning. So you want to pinch your flowers closed and then just come back through with your pollen, and a lot of people use a paintbrush for that. So things like this, brassicas also, squashes, brassicas, are all examples of outcrossing plants. With brassicas, you could just let one variety go to seed. So that's a really good strategy, right? If you're harvesting your broccoli, and you're harvesting your cauliflower and you're harvesting those things, just pick one of them that you want to save seed from and let it produce those yellow flowers and create seed for you. A lot of those are also biennials, so they're not going to produce until that second year, things like cabbages or things like that. So if you just don't take it out of your garden in the fall and let it flower in the spring, you can save seed from that way. Hand pollination and isolation barriers are also required for certain situations. So if your neighbors all around you have big gardens, you're just going to want to be a little bit more finicky about this when you're saving seed. This is a person. These stock photos are so funny. But if you just do a search for hand pollination, this is one of the first results I got. And I think this gal is hand pollinating strawberries, which I've never seen that before in some sort of hydroponic indoor situation. But it was pretty cute, and it gets the point across of what's going on. So tools that you might need as a new seed saver. You're going to need things that you probably already have around your house, a whole lot of these items. So buckets, jars, sieves, strainers, fans, screens, pillowcases come in really handy for things. Plastic tubs and storage bins are all that you need to get started. My favorite method of processing like a large amount of like beans or peas or things like that is to put them in a plastic storage tote. Then you put on some music that you like, and you stand in there and you do this until your legs are really tired. And then all you have to do is screen it and run it through a fan. And you can save all your seeds that way, but it's a real easy way to crush it up. Things like space heaters, fans, and a dehumidifier can be really helpful if you're doing these things over the winter in a garage or something like that. Try to make it comfortable for yourself as you do that work. For more information, a lot of the things that I've talked about here are listed there. The Bionutrient Food Association, Dan Kittredge is wildly inspiring of a lot of my work. He has a lot of amazing resources available online. He basically grew up on a farm where his parents were some of the first founders of like the organic seed movement in this country. So Dan literally grew up barefoot on like the first organic farm. His parents really wrote the book and the standards for a lot of this work for how we can get back into alignment with the land. He also talks a lot about our gut biome and our health. His organization has developed something, microbionutrient meter. It's very expensive right now, but hopefully the technology, comes down in price. It looks a lot like a spectrometer, if you've seen one of those, or what's the thing that measures sugars? Brix. Anyway, I can't think. Refractometer. But it's a pocket-held device that you can put a plant tissue into. So a piece of a leaf, you can put into there, and it will really quickly analyze that and let you know what nutrients are missing from your soil. It's really, really inspiring. I was able to do a internship during my time in Fairfield with Faith Reeves, who is the soil health advisor for the Bionutrient Food Association, and she's really super inspiring. Rowan White, I talked a little bit about her. I do have a resource here. You can print out this book from her website. It's called Breeding Organic Vegetables. She wrote this with Brian Connolly, but it's a pretty small resource, but it's free, and it's available at sierraseeds.com. You can check it out. It goes really deep into some of those genetic things. Sierra Seeds, it's .org. Sierraseeds.org. You can look up Rowan White and her work, and this book, Sierra, SIERRA, SEEDS.org. It's right up there at the top. Oh, yeah. For some reason, that one didn't do the little linky thing. The Organic Seed Alliance has a huge amount of resources available on their website. You guys can go to the Organic Seed Alliance and find videos and all kinds of information for how to save seeds. The Organic Seed Grower by John Navazio is a really excellent resource book. I have some other books up here if you guys want to take a look afterwards, where you can find more information. The Seed Growers podcast is really inspiring. I listen to it a lot. It's run by Dan Brisebois. If you haven't heard of Vandana Shiva, she's absolutely amazing. She founded the Navdanya Institute in India, and Navdanya International does a lot of work. She's written countless number of books. Her story is really inspiring. She was a molecular physicist, and she graduated and started to work in her field, and then kind of came to this realization that the women in the town that she grew up in were starving and raising food for everyone in the area, basically with no funds and no resources. And she really dove headfirst into that work. So she's kind of the pioneer of this idea of ecofeminism, and she's spent her entire career now basically fighting against the damages done by the Green Revolution and the things that have happened in India and to Indian farmers because of that. Matt Powers is a really great resource. It's the permaculturestudent.com. He's written a book called Regenerative Soil Microscopy, has a few other books, but he can really help you. He's a great resource for understanding more about soil health and the things that are going on in your soil. John Kempf, who I referenced earlier, he's an Amish farmer from Ohio. His work is very inspiring. Advancing Eco Ag is his company, And they sell a lot of those inoculants that I was talking about, those microbial inoculants that you can get for your seed. And then Dr. James F. White, and he published that white paper on the rhizophagy cycle. And I can click back to that one. This next slide is just about Merry Lea and how to get involved. I'll be teaching a class January 31st is the next one of those. It's called A Year in the Garden. It's one of our public programs. Those will be bi-monthly, and I'll be doing a lot of this kind of work, but in deep connection with the folks who sign up and come in. We'll be gardening together throughout the whole course and life cycle. We'll do seed work together. We'll also be making some food every time. We do love to have volunteers. I'm sure you guys have signed up and get our emails probably, but we do host a lot of public programs. The whole property, it's almost 2,000 acres, is open to the public from dawn until dusk. We have hiking trails. It's a beautiful place. And this is all of that information for Merry Lea. And I'm happy to take questions. Do we have any questions? Yeah.
I sprout in courtyard.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite source for that kind of seed?
Ooh, that's a great question. I do not have a great source for that kind of seed. Although I do think probably green cover could be a good option for you because it'd be easier to buy bulk seed from them. And I know that their seed is really vital and delicious. You'll just want to look for things that haven't been pre-inoculated, I would assume, for your purposes, or you'll want to rinse them off.
True Leaf Market?
I have definitely grown their seeds, and I feel like they were good seed, but I don't know anything about like where they're from or how they're being grown. Yeah.
If you could get that micro, whatever it was.
Yeah, I'll go back to that one. So he's at Advancing Eco Ag. Advancing Eco Agriculture is his organization. They are based out of Ohio. I think they do have locations in other places, but if you ever have the opportunity to hear John Kempf speak, he's wildly inspiring and knows a whole lot about biology and microscopy and is doing a lot of this really interesting work. So, work you should check him out. Yeah.
You had that whole bunch of seed.
Yeah, so basically that that mix that was out there is a cover crop mix, and it's from Green Cover, is the name of that organization. I can kind of like bop back maybe to where they're, it's way back here. Oh, there it is. So this is a list of all the species that are in that particular mix, but it's really designed to build soil health. So a lot of those things that are in there are really helpful for creating a lot of biomass, for sequestering nitrogen and things like that, and really building your soil health. And it's already been treated with a mycorrhizal inoculant. So basically, when you plant this into the soil, it already knows how to make those relationships to build that soil food web.
And then the next year, plant something else.
Yes, or you could also use this. I used this as an understory crop in a lot of my beds this year. So I planted it in, and then after that came in with my tomato transplants, pepper plant transplants, squash transplants. So I'm just disturbing a little bit of the soil where I'm putting my plant plugs in, and I'm letting that cover crop go. I did not touch it, and it was really beautiful, and a lot of it is still growing now, even in the winter. I'm still seeing those clovers. I'm still seeing some of those other, maybe it's this, I don't know. It feels to me like there's a mustard or something like that in there, but I don't see it on that label. Yeah. I'm the wrong person to ask. I don't believe in weeds.
You just plant it right.
Yeah, you don't ever want to see straight ground. That's one of the biggest kind of issues that we're seeing is really that paradigm, that idea that we wanted our gardens to be tidy is a huge problem because bare soil, your microbiology just dies. It doesn't ever want to be bare. So my goal is to always either have living cover underneath all of my plants, and you can use microclover or other like really low things if you want to for aesthetics, and that's fine. But I just plant all my beds super, super densely, and I have lots of things growing in them all the time because I do not want to see the bare soil ever. Another way around that, if you don't want to have cover crops in all of your beds, is you can also just deeply mulch. So using old hay, old straw, leaves, things like that, to keep that soil covered and moist can also work.
Get that? Is it only available in the large bags or?
This mycorrhizal mix from Green Cover, you can order that. I think the smallest size you can get is maybe like a 5-pound bag, but it's also really inexpensive. You can get a 25-pound bag and share with your friends, or a 50-pound bag and share with your friends. They also do a really interesting program called First Acre. And you have to go kind of early in the spring and sign up for it. They'll send you a huge 50-pound bag. I've been working through one with my mom for like the past 5 years. But they'll send you this huge bag that's like a really diverse, garden polyculture mix, and all they want you to do is donate some of the food you grow to like your local food pantry or something like that. But they'll send it to you for free if you get on their list. So what is their site like? Yeah, I think it's just greencover.com, and I think they'll be the first one that comes up if you just look for Green Cover. Yeah, that's my mom. Hey.
Broad form, my bag, and then just broadcast.
Yes. Yeah.
And that particular bed, we planted potatoes in, which we made it pretty simple to just dig up, what needed to be dug up, and we left it, and it grew weird things.
Yeah, it grows all kinds of weird stuff. Yeah, that's great.
You mentioned early in the talk about the seed savers in Iowa. And they save their seeds, and then some of them are sent out or dispersed.
Yes. Okay, so here's what I'll say. I have a complex relationship with Seed Savers Exchange, having worked there for a couple years. I think a lot of times we have our rose-colored glasses on when we go into a place where we're just looking at it from the outside. And we're like, wow, I'm going to go work there. It's amazing. And while a lot of their work is really super amazing, I would highly encourage you to, instead of ordering the seed out of the Seed Savers Exchange catalog that comes to your house and has all those beautiful things in it, I need you to do a little more work. I need you to go to their website and find the little banner at the top that says The Exchange, because the exchange is the reason that Seed Savers was founded and what it was originally designed to do. So the exchange is a way to get seed from other people just like you who are growing seed all over the country and all over the world. So when you go into the exchange, you can see where that seed was grown, who's been growing it, how long they've been growing it, find the varieties that you want, and in a lot of cases, send them a self-addressed stamped envelope, and they will share their seeds with you. So if you're going to utilize Seed Savers Exchange, please do that, because that's the way to actually get those heritage seeds that are being grown by home gardeners all over the place, and find them in your area, which is also really important when we're talking about this kind of work. We really want to be regionally adapting, regionally appropriate seed. So plants that were grown on the West Coast or in Arizona aren't maybe going to do great here in the Midwest. They're probably going to have fungal problems. They're probably going to get powdery mildew because those plants didn't have to develop the ability to cohabitate with those things because they're not from this environment. So I'd super encourage you to do that. Like, go find the seed that's being grown in your area through the exchange. Yeah.
East or west would you go?
For me, I'm thinking like the Midwest. As a whole, I'm really, really happy to grow seed that was grown in Wisconsin, Iowa, Ohio, places that are dealing with the same kind of environmental conditions that we are. We have some pretty extreme temperature fluctuations here. We have inconsistent moisture and things like that. And that's what I'm really looking for when I think about seeds to grow out that are going to do well here. And then I also like to say that plants adapt really quickly. So if you can get through one generation of growing a type of corn or growing a type of squash on your own land and save those seeds, their children, their immediate offspring, are going to do better in your environment. So once you get this thing going, it really self-propels quickly, really fast. Yeah. Any other questions?
First generation, is that more of like a genetic variant seed to seed, or is that an epigenetic thing, or?
That's epigenetics. Something that I wrote a paper on when I was in college was something called the Dutch starvation winter. So there was a study that followed the children of women who went through this occupation, and that's what it was called, the Dutch starvation winter. So the mothers were denied food for a significant period of time. They faced starvation. And what they found was, we're not talking about women that were pregnant at the time. Later, their offspring have much higher levels of all of these diseases that we're seeing right now in our population. So what we know because of epigenetics is that if the mother, and this is true about plants just as equally, and I know that's really strange to think about, as it is about people and other animals. So when the mother plant is starved for nutrients, when a human is starved for nutrients, their offspring will not have the same genetic predisposition to thriving, abundant health. And it's just a fact. It's been a longitudinal study for 100 years afterwards. And so that we understand now that is epigenetics. It's really showing that if the parent plant is stressed, if it doesn't have the microbes, if it doesn't have the microbiology, if it doesn't have the appropriate minerals in the soil, its offspring, the seeds, are not going to have the same potential for health. So that's why I say, if you can get it through 1 year, even if it's stressed, even if it's not doing great, even if it's not thriving, if you can get through 1 year on your land and save those seeds, you can improve that crop. The next year it will do better. The next year after that, it's going to be amazing. I've seen it happen, and it's really cool.
You mentioned the connection between the soil biome health. My son has a lot of allergies and all kinds of stuff, and I don't know where it popped up from. And where can I find out more about that? About obviously, if we grow it, it's going to be better.
Yeah, the Bionutrient Food Association, I'll click back to that one, is how I learned a lot of this work. I also, my oldest son, from the time he was really little, had a lot of food sensitivities, a lot of gut health problems, and it kind of led me down this bizarre rabbit hole of things. But what we need to understand is that it's very unlikely that our own mothers didn't eat diverse, culturally, regionally appropriate food supply. There's definitely a connection between how we're birthed, how we're fed as infants, whether or not we get colostrum. I mean, there's a lot of things that tie directly into our flora. Also, antibiotics, right? If you've been on a round of antibiotics, I'm sure everyone's experienced this, where your gut's really not happy afterwards. So really high quality probiotics are helpful, and also eating fermented foods is a really great way to kind of rebuild that gut health. And very similar to kind of what we're asking from the soil, right? We want to be able to.
Got dairy allergy, shellfish allergy, all that stuff, which none of our other family members,
Yeah, that's a great place to start, is just rebuilding that gut biome. It takes a lot of work to get there, but it's very worth it.
I'm just wondering, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but now that you're at Merry Lea, do you see or envision Merry Lea becoming kind of a regional trial center with seeds? Because we certainly need that.
I would really love that. And I have said at previous talks that I've given over the course of I've only been here since March, right? I lived outside of the state for like 20 years and did not want to come back. And my mom sings this little song, Indiana wants me, man, I can't go back there. I was singing that for a really long time. But now here I am back in Indiana. And my mom thinks that's hilarious. Anyway, to your point, Merry Lea has, funding that sustains us, right, as an organization. And so I have said to people already at talks that I've given, like, give me your problems. so that I can try it, right? So I can trial it, so I can throw things at the wall. I had a really great field day with Urban Soil Health and Extension, and some other great, partner organizations in the Savannah Institute this past summer, where I really just offered myself up to my regional farmers. Because a lot of this, even though some of it feels like this is old knowledge, right? Like these are old ways. Permaculture is all largely based on indigenous knowledge. For us, it seems new, right? And a lot of the science around it and the science that supports it is new. So a lot of trials are needed for doing this work, and I'm really super, super stoked to do that and to be in partnership and to be the person throwing things at the wall to see what works for us. I'd love to. Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you so much, everyone. Also, please email me. Email me your burning questions. Come to my talks. I love to build community here, and I don't know a lot of people in Indiana yet, so reach out.